Dun, da, da, da. Oh, okay. It does say it's streaming.
Okay. Yep, there we go. I haven't got it on my end yet, but
Okay.
it's weird that it's not showing up on. Is it going to the Virgils page? Oh, no, there it is. Okay. So yeah,
Do you
we're
see
on.
it?
Yep,
Nice. All right, so we're actually live.
we are actually live. So let's see if we
Okay.
can get let's see if we can get any of these other ones working.
So people tune in. They're just gonna see us troubleshooting. Super fun.
Oh yeah. But that's always what the first stream is. It's always just and then you delete that one.
All right, let's go to Facebook. So we're gonna go to live video. Go live. Connect streaming software to go live. Add links. Man, a lot of product managers on this. All right, so okay, so YouTube at the very least is working.
Right. So we know that it is. Facebook is being slow to load.
So it looks like Facebook. I wonder if it's something. So let's see. YouTube is working.
Okay. It's not up on Facebook yet.
I wonder if I need to hit stop or something. It's like you gotta set up the streams before or something like that. So I'm gonna see
Yeah,
if.
hit stop and then just see if.
Oh, okay. Now it's working on Facebook.
Let's
Cool.
see.
Yeah, it's working on Facebook now. But when am I going live? Connect video source. Complete post details. What is your live video about?
Oh yeah, you have to put all that stuff.
Parents Corner with Justin Woolard Virgils. How kids are getting past tech controls. Discussion of the latest from deep dive from the Wall Street Journal. Okay. Add to your post. Okay, saving that. So I guess the idea is you have everything set up
Right,
before, and then you just.
and then you go.
Okay, so I think we can go live now. And then the last one would be LinkedIn, I guess, right?
Mm-hmm.
Video, select video. No, I don't want to upload a video. How do I go live here?
That one I
Content.
don't know. I've never messed with live on LinkedIn.
I went to some. Content. Trending articles. Home. Okay. LinkedIn live. LinkedIn live stream. Create an event. Says you have to create an event, it looks like. So I guess that's interesting. Okay, so I think video, create an event. So I think it's an event.
Yeah, that sounds
LinkedIn
right.
Live. Yeah, that's what it is. Yeah, it's you have to create a LinkedIn event, it looks like. Okay. So we have to do that. So we're live though on Facebook.
I'm not seeing it on the um the Virgils
Facebook page.
page. Mm-mm.
Yeah, we have to go net live now.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Okay. All right. We're now live. Ooh,
Hey, there we
spooky.
are.
Nice. That's exciting. All right. So should we just record like 15 minutes of talking about this? See what
Yeah,
happens?
yeah, we'll do that. That sounds good.
Okay. So let me pull up the article, and how should I do this? We can do it in here. It's fine. So let's see. Wall Street Journal. There's a new. What is it?
You want me to? I've got it pulled up. If you want me to share it.
Yeah. Can you share your screen and we just
Uh-huh.
talk about it?
Yep, that'll work.
Okay. I'll pull this down here. Okay.
I wish that here's the one thing I don't like about how Riverside shares screens, because I was trying to share screen the last time I was doing something like this,
Hmm.
is if it looked like it did on our screen, it would
Yeah.
be perfect.
And it
But it
doesn't quite do that.
but no, it instead of putting it over there and then us stacked on each other, which is the way to do it, it puts us on top and then that's in the screen on the bottom.
Yeah. I think it's different per platform.
And it's like,
Well.
and I'm, I mean, it is what it is. But let's see, I'm gonna try something though. Yeah, because I mean, this looks great on our end.
All right. Well, I think it's fine. We can just give it a
No,
try.
it is what it is. I mean, it's not a big deal.
Okay. So so this new article came out from the Wall Street Journal entitled what is it? What is it, Justin?
Kids know how to get around iPhone and iPad parental controls. Here's how to regain control.
So kids are smart. They
Yeah.
know how to
Oh,
they know
absolutely.
how to break out of jail.
And I think most of us parents know that they are. And you're always trying to fight that battle of what can I do to set the parameters that I want to set the limits that I want to set. And they're always working to try to figure out how to get around that. But I mean, you and I know that even
Yeah.
because it hasn't been that long since we've been kids and we were doing it ourselves with whatever it was at the moment.
Well, I mean that that's something you and I have talked about, and I talk to
Yeah.
parents about. Is like it's I think the there's a short-term fix in using some of these controls, which are getting better. So
Yeah.
you have third-party solutions like Bark, which is quite good, and they've been around I think for 7 or 8 years. And then you have Apple is continues to improve their sort of family controls. So you have
Yeah.
screen time. Um, Screen time limits. You have a new feature with iOS 16 where if a kid runs into a limit, they can text their parents, and and it's the permissions are pretty granular, and that's all well and good. But I think at the same time, as the tools get better, it's a good reminder that they are not perfect, and
Exactly.
it can actually be kind of counterproductive to rely on them. Because I mean, just like you and I were saying, I mean, growing up, like I was, my parents were not keen to let me play Grand Theft Auto or watch R-rated movies or what have you,
Right.
right? At sort of 11, 12 years old. But there's always that kid in the neighborhood whose parents are a little bit more lax,
Oh, yeah.
either not paying attention or they got an older brother or something like that. And so, I mean, the same thing applies, and perhaps even more so, where kids are going to get access to stuff, right?
Absolutely. I mean, I can remember, setting up, you know, my own AOL accounts just so that I could get on and do whatever I wanted to whenever I wanted to without any kind of
Yeah.
parental backup. And there were all kinds of ways that we were doing that back in the day. And so when my kids start doing similar things, I can't be surprised by that. It's just, it's what kids do. And I think what you said there's really important is to realize that we can't rely on these limiters. The best way to use them is as a tool to teach our
Hmm.
kids how to, limit themselves, how to be able to look and say, I'd only want to spend an hour doing this instead of the 5 hours that I could spend doing this. And you know, these are helpful, just like they're
Hmm.
helpful for me. I mean, I like having the things set up on the different social medias and things on my own phone and on my own iPad where, it's going to tell me when I've spent more time than I wanted to, but, it is not going, I can always get around it, just like I know my kids can always find a way to get around it. And but it's a reminder more than it
Hmm. Hmm.
is a fence. It
Hmm.
is not going to be there, or it's a chain link fence, not a brick wall.
Right.
There's going to be ways to work through it and get around it, and somebody's going to build new and better bolt cutters all the time.
Totally. And any sufficiently motivated kid is going to figure that out and relatively quickly. I mean,
Oh
there's,
yeah,
it's always a sort of a escalating, uh, you know, war or whatever between people, building the
exactly.
walls and those trying to break out of it. And what I just want to highlight one thing you said, which is kind of interesting and sort of counterintuitive, which is perhaps the best way the way to get the most value out of these things is actually to think of them almost purely as self-regulation tools,
Exactly.
not
Exactly.
not applying them to third parties like your kids.
Yeah, and I think it's a way to teach them that and to start helping them with that. I mean, I think one of the best things that Apple does is, having it set up with the parental controls where they have to ask me if they can download a certain app to their phone.
Hmm.
But even a few weeks, which has been great because every once in a while there's something that they want that I'm kind of like, I'll read the description and it's like, there's something here that looks like it could be a little fishy and what kind of information are they getting and this kind of stuff.
Hmm.
And so I'll say, you don't need to do that. But then it was interesting. I was talking to um, my 15-year-old daughter about a week or so ago, and she was saying that the way that you can get around that is you go into the already purchased apps, and if I've already downloaded it or my wife has already downloaded it and they go into the list of apps that have already been purchased, they can grab it from there without having to ask for permission, which I didn't know until she told me. I mean, that's a tip that's not in this particular article. And I thought there were some really good things in this article, but there's always going to be something that we don't know, always something that they're going to figure out before we do, because not only are each of our kids doing it, but all their friends are doing it too. And they're
Right.
watching TikTok videos about it and YouTube videos about it. And I know I'm not going to keep up with everything that, some 12-year-old figures out and throws up on YouTube. I'm just not going to do it. And so, luckily I have a type A, very rule centered 15-year-old that'll tell me how to do the stuff that I haven't figured out on my.
Yeah, and that comes from intrinsic motivation, or
Yep.
there's something about the way that she has a mindset such that that
Oh,
makes
yeah.
sense. And I think what you were describing there sort of reminds me of like interviews, or I don't know, biographies or whatever, of some of the Silicon Valley folks who figured out how to build huge companies over the last 20 plus
Oh, yeah.
years. And a lot of them, they had that in their nature growing up, right? Like they're hackers and they're
Yep.
figuring stuff out. And so that sort of mindset of this creative problem solving, like, figuring out the third entrance into the place where you're sufficiently motivated to
Oh,
get
yeah.
into. Yeah, that can be a great thing if
I
directed in
mean,
the
all
right
of us
way,
have
right?
read the story about the Captain Crunch whistles, and
What is
how
this?
the.
I don't know what
Oh,
this is.
you haven't heard this? Okay, so
No, no.
this is like early hacking, and you'll a lot of times when you read, I want to say Steve Wozniak is one of the ones that is credited with doing this, but I could be wrong. But
Hmm.
you read these biographies of like these guys that came about in the 70s, early 80s, and one of the original kind of like hacker things was what you could do with the phone system. And so
Hmm.
somebody figured out that you could whistle particular tones on these whistles that came in Captain Crunch boxes and be able to make long distance calls from payphones for free. And I've read that in several people's, biographies where you're sitting there going, somebody, really wanted to make a long distance phone call and they figured out that it was the tones that were going on in the background that allowed you to connect. And so they
Huh.
figured out how to play them on these things. And I was like, but how genius is that? And it was kids that were figuring it out and then sharing it
Right.
with each other in zines and
Yeah.
word of mouth.
That's amazing. Well,
Oh
hopefully
yeah,
our nuclear arsenal is not secured in the same way. But
exactly, exactly.
um, so you mentioned just to dive into the article a little bit, there are some good practical tips, anecdotes of ways that kids break out of some of the controls that you set in place. Did you find any of these particularly surprising or of use to parents?
I think they're all of use. I didn't find any of them particularly surprising. Not that I had seen them being used in this particular way, but
Hmm.
there it talks in here about changing the time zone to be able to kind of trick the screen time function. And there are so many things that changing the time zone on your computer or your phone or something will trick different apps into thinking different things. I can remember doing it to get free plays on different things and stuff because you only, had a certain amount per day or something, so you could tell your computer it was 3 years earlier, and you could, get extra things. So these are classic old school kind of things that it's just looks a little different in the new day. But yeah, I mean, if you've set your kids to have your phone is essentially a brick at 8 o'clock,
Mm,
and they can change the time zone to be Pacific time instead of Eastern time, they've just given themselves extra hours. And I like that they say that, in this article, she writes that Apple has figured that out, and in the newer versions of iOS, you're not supposed to be able to do that anymore. And one of the things is I mean, sometime this week or early next week, we're going to have iOS 16 coming out, and it will
hmm
fix a lot of the things that are out there now. But that just means that it gives us a whole new list of things that we're going to have to figure out because the kids are going to start jumping on it as soon as it's there. Honestly, the beta's been out all summer. They've probably already jumped on it and figured out how to work around whatever has changed since then.
hmm Yeah, I think that's right. And so you actually inspired me to sign up for the beta for iOS
Yeah,
16 and the new Mac operating system, which I don't think I had ever done that before. I usually wait until the stuff comes out, but I
yeah.
have been pretty blown away by the the features that they've incorporated generally, but especially when it comes to screen time and family
Oh, yeah.
restrictions. Yeah, how have you been using that over the summer?
I haven't used it a whole lot just because I'm the only one in the family that's got the beta on the system.
Got it.
But just being able to look at it, and the main thing is it's a lot more granular than it was. You're able to
Hmm.
dive in and just make it do things that in 15 you couldn't do, in just diving down into how much time you can spend on certain things and knowing what it is that your kids are looking at. Because I think the other
Hmm.
thing, other than just screen time, that parents are worried about is, what are they getting exposed to?
Mm.
Whether it is pornography or just, maybe you're looking and saying, I don't want my kids exposed to all the violence that's out there. Whatever it is, you're not necessarily ever going to be able to block all of that,
Hmm.
but you can find ways to at least know what it is they're looking at and when. as you can see, one of the things I like about how it'll show you the websites that they've gone to. It'll show you how much time they've spent on different apps and things. But I think
Hmm.
parents have to be aware that kids are going to figure out how to get to what they want to get to in the same way that they're going to figure out how to do this time. So if they're wanting to look at dirty pictures, they're going to figure out how to get to that through the avenues that they're allowed to use. And
Right.
whether it is, you know, you can find that on Twitter and
Yeah.
it's not always going to be blocked. You can find that on Reddit. And if you don't have Reddit completely blocked, you're going to be able to pretty easily find that stuff. I mean, it
Yep.
is, just kind of, but being able to look and see what they're doing. I think they did a really good job with that in this, being able to dive into the settings and set up a little bit better what you can and cannot access.
Yeah, and this is really focused on sort of the tools and the technology that you as a parent have at your disposal. And it sounds like
Right.
there are broadly kind of two buckets. One would be controls, sort of barriers that you can erect to make sure that your kids are not veering off into territory that's going to be problematic. Web content, putting some restrictions around the games that they can download or apps, things like that.
Yeah.
And then so there's kind of the protective element, but then there's, I mean, frankly, I just call it is what it is, surveillance, right? Like
Oh
keeping
yeah,
tabs
it is
on my
surveillance.
yeah,
Absolutely. I mean,
surveillance, right?
there's no other way to put it. I mean,
Yeah.
it is. I mean, and the way that I look at it is I try to use that, you know, as little as possible. Like I'm not,
Right.
I don't want to feel like I have to go in and like read all of somebody's text or something like that.
Sure. Sure.
But being able to look and have some kind of idea, like, I mean, I know it was controversial, but personally thought that, you know, Apple having the algorithm to be able to look at,
Hmm.
messages coming into iMessage and certain other apps and be able to see, are there not safe pictures being shared around?
Hmm.
That's a good thing. I mean, it's like, I don't need to go look at that, but if I know that it's there, then I can begin to have that conversation of what is going on here, because I know that my kids are aware that there are, you know, people that are nefarious online that are looking
Right.
to, because they talk about it. They talk about it with their friends online. They talk about it with us. So
Hmm.
knowing they know that that's there and being able to have, sort of a way to be able to gauge if anything like that is happening is, in my opinion, a good thing. I understand why some people don't like it, but
Hmm.
as a father of three kids, I look at it and go, yeah, there's some good and bad in this, but I think the good outweighs the bad when it comes to these things.
Yeah, I mean, I think it makes total sense. I mean, you as sort of head of the household and everything, you obviously know things that your kids don't know, and you're better
Right.
prepared to have some of those difficult conversations. I mean, this honestly kind of reminds me of what I remember of the debates after like the Snowden leaks, and everything that was going on in kind of the post 9/11 world around surveillance, where people were grappling with for the first time like what is the right balance of security and having insight into what's going on. And
Right.
I do think there's a very resonant set of questions or considerations that apply to the family, sort of to the household, as we were talking about it, kind of the national security level a couple of decades
Right.
ago. And so, I guess a key question would be, um, the sort of the first one is to track or not to track, like to keep tabs on things. And I think at least as what we've just talked about, the answer is, it's probably useful in some regard. But then the secondary question is how do you make your kids or whoever's within that that purview like sufficiently aware, or do you like very practically, do you talk to your kids about the fact that you can see what's going on, that you have certain signals set up, and that this may cause tough conversations to you may have to have tough conversations about this content?
Oh, absolutely. I
Yeah.
think that you need to do that. I mean, I think, you know, I I think you probably should set these kinds of things up, but I think that you should talk to your kids and say, this is set up.
Hmm.
This is why it's set up. And because they shouldn't be surprised when something comes across and you're having a conversation about it.
Right.
I've tried a lot of different things just in, restricting particular things within the house and everything. And
Hmm.
I've used the circle device. Right now we've got everything set up with Google Wi-Fi and their safe search is on, but it's never gonna get none of these things are ever going to get everything. So you need to have those conversations and what are your expectations for your family? I think is
Hmm.
a big thing to do because that's going to be different for different people. Some people are going to be, you were talking about Grand Theft Auto earlier. Some people are going to be perfectly fine with their kids playing Grand Theft Auto. It's just not anything that they think is an issue. And then other parents are going to be, I really don't think that you should, but I don't think it should stop at no.
Hmm.
There should be a here's why I don't want you to. Here's why I think that this is not a good influence or whatever it is that you're wanting to say about it. But I think that, I think it's so important in, I've learned this in the church world, in the business world, in the family world. Speaking about the why is
Hmm.
one of the most important things. Anytime that you're building something new out or making any kind of big change, if you can get the person that you're working with to understand why you're doing it, they're much more likely to buy into it. And that's so true of our kids. If you say, I'm setting up these parameters on your phone, like
Hmm.
say, you mentioned the Bark app earlier, which works a lot better on Android than it does on iOS, just because iOS is more sandbox than Android is. And I know a lot of people that use it. And if you're going to set that up, here it's set up. Here's what it does. Here's why we're doing it.
Hmm.
And I think that speaks a lot into it. My kids know that, we have the family set up where we know where everybody is through the iOS family app.
Hmm.
And here, and we talked about it. Here's why it's set up this way. Here's why we're going to share that information with each other because, sometimes bad things happen. If you're not
Right.
where we think if you're not home when we think you need to be, and I look and you're stuck on the side of the highway, then I know I can go to the side of the highway and help you out.
Right.
Something has happened that you can't call, but your phone is telling me where you are. And, those can be good things, but some people might decide not to use those things. But whatever it is that you're going to set up, I think it is really important to have that conversation of, you know, I want to set, so you're setting up the iMessage restrictions that are going to inform you if something's come to your kid's phone that is a picture that the algorithm says is pornographic. And
Hmm.
so why are we setting this up? Well, because there are predators online that will send you these things and it's good for, your mental health and your security that we would know if somebody does that.
Hmm.
Simple as that. I mean, it doesn't have to be a long, drawn out thing.
So, I mean, two practical questions then. One is, okay, let's say you've had the conversation. Kids are like, okay, this kind of makes sense. I'm bought enough into it that, I'm aware this is going on. And then, they do stumble upon, out of curiosity by accident, friend sends them something, whatever else, something that dings you with an alert.
Right.
What's the next step there?
It's kind of a different because luckily I haven't had that situation yet. But I think it's I can remember those similar situations, with the tech that we had when I was a kid. So it is what it is. And I think you just have, I mean, it's a good opportunity to have that conversation of, you know, so I sit down with my son and go, well, I mean, it's normal that you would be interested in this, and let's have this conversation about, so let's say, I mean, it's something of a sexual nature. It gives you an opportunity to have that conversation about sex and sexuality and all of these things that come into that, you
Hmm.
know, and and actually have a real conversation, parent to child, and not go in an accusatory kind of thing. That's one of the things that I
Right.
look at. If you go in and it's like, I found this on your phone, well, that's not going to do anything but just start to build a wall up. Just go in and
Hmm.
say,
Hmm.
I saw this, you know, this is a little concerning. Is this something that you were looking at? Is it something that somebody sent you? Just start to have that conversation. I'm not saying it's going to be an easy conversation. It's going to be an awkward as heck conversation. But have that conversation and show them that they can talk to you about these things. And I think
Hmm.
that's one of the things that you and I have had a lot of great conversations about both the good and bad of technology. I think this is part of the good of technology is it opens up some really organic ways to have conversations that had to come in sort of forced ways before. you know
Yeah.
it and so this is just one of those things that it does is it allow you to be able to say, let's have a conversation about this. That I had this set up, so that I was going to see this when you saw it, so now let's talk
Hmm.
about it. But you
It
have
makes
to
a
have
lot
that
of
conversation first,
right.
that they know that you're going to see it.
Exactly, because sort of the worst case scenario, and I have a strong suspicion that this is the case for a lot of families, is like, um, you know, you have the tracking stuff set up, whether it's Bark or whatever. The kids don't know, and
Mm-hmm.
then something does come up, and now you're stuck in a bind where it's like, do you let them know that you were, so fundamentally, the trust-based relationship is that's you're putting that at risk, I think.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
so. And I think you have to have that trust-based relationship is really important. And
Yeah.
it's things like, you know, and again, part of the reason that having it's set up to where, your kids have to ask about whether they can download certain apps is what they have on their phone at that point. So, you
Hmm.
know, I know that using WhatsApp or Kick or some of these other things, they can get around those communication efforts. I mean,
Hmm.
Discord, you can get around those things. And so you just, you got to know what's there and know what is available to them. And I think that's one of the things that a lot of times we as parents don't do is spend enough time on some of these things ourselves to know what they're capable of.
Hmm.
My advice is if you're going to allow your kid to have an app that has any kind of communication with the outside world on it, you need to spend a little time on it first to know exactly what it's capable of, what can be done with it, so that
Hmm.
know what is good and bad about it. So you can have that conversation and say, I'm going to let you use this because, all your friends are communicating this way, but you need to be aware of this and know that I'm aware of this.
Hmm. Yeah, so not leave it as a total black box,
Right.
because at that point, you don't even know what you don't know. I mean, going into it. So how can
Exactly.
you have a productive conversation? I guess, the flip side to that though is, the rate at which these new digital experiences, media, and sort of the cultural phenomena, all these kind
Oh
of things like around them are emerging is accelerating, or at least it seems to be. So it can feel probably pretty overwhelming, to try to keep up with this stuff. And the kids are going to be able to access it a lot sooner. So as they're doing that, I mean, do you how do you think about staying up to date, with your kids? Like, I know something people talk about is kind of co-screen time, or like collaborative screen time. Do you do stuff together?
We do some of that,
Mm.
and where and a lot of it is just us sharing things with each other. It's like I know the apps that the kids are on, not just because of the fact that I have to approve them, but also because they're sharing with me from them. So I know what's going on there because they're sharing with me. And what's been interesting to me, and I mean, and part of it is, I'm been always been kind of a bit of an early adopter, so I'm always interested in what is new coming out. But there have
Hmm.
been so many times where I have read something about, oh, here's the new app that everybody's afraid of. Here's the 5 apps you need to watch out on your kid's phone. I'm like, these apps have been around for 5 or 6 years. They're not new, and this
Yeah.
has been available for these kids to do this for a long time, and we're just now getting frightened of it. And
Right. Right.
it's crazy to me when I'll read about something and it's like, we didn't know about this, and I'm like, that app is on the front page of your iPhone app store. Just flip to it every once in a while and see what people are downloading so that you get an, even if you don't download it yourself, at least you get an idea of what's out there and what it
Yeah.
does.
Yeah. It's if you're. I mean, by the time you've heard about it, it's probably too late.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's right. And so that then comes back to what you talked about with your daughter, which is that mindset, that sort of proactive, having the right kind of mindset, um, cultivating that in your kids so that when they do have encounters with new media,
Hmm.
and experiences kind of on this digital frontier, they can do it in a way where it's more likely to be a healthy or productive, or at least not negative experience. So in the case of your daughter, for example, what magic did you work to cultivate that kind of mindset?
Oh, that's just her. She's always been that way. It's just yeah. I mean, she's just that way. I mean, it's that's easy. Um, but I think she's always been the one that's going to follow the rules, and so it's been
Yeah.
setting up the rules and expectations. And I think even with kids who aren't going to be the ones that are going to just in and of themselves be a rule follower, it
Hmm.
is setting up those expectations. This is what we expect, and this is why, again, that we expect this.
Hmm.
And, you know, not trying to scare the kids, but set up and, here's why I don't want you to here's why I don't think you need to use WhatsApp. Here's why I don't think you need to use Kick, because people can use these anonymously in nefarious ways, and you're not quite ready to deal with everything that goes on with that.
Hmm.
And there's just so many aspects of what goes on online, and it's interesting. I think that I look back at my parents, and I'm part of that first generation that was coming online, starting with like CompuServe and Prodigy and AOL and
Yeah.
dial up local bulletin boards before that. And it's interesting to me because I think of everything that we think about that our kids are getting into on there now. Yeah,
Hmm.
it's faster and it's more interesting and it's more readily available, but you could get all of that on your local bulletin board back in, 1991 too. It's not anything that's new. It
Hmm.
is just better in the sense of its technology.
Right. It's more
And
immersive. It's more engaging. It's more personalized now with everything
yeah.
that's going on with AI. Yeah.
And so we just have to look, and I think sometimes it's just remembering the fact that there was a point when I was a 14-year-old
Hmm.
and understanding what it was that I was able to figure out and do at that point, and go, okay, they have better access to it now, and they have better access to people telling them how to do it. And I need to have the conversations that my parents didn't have with me because they didn't realize everything that was
Right.
there.
Right.
And because I can think back to you know having logging off of AOL, off of a chat room, and going, man, there are some creepy people on here. And
Yeah.
now thinking now and going, it's not just one place where they are, it is all over the place where my kids are having to watch out for these people who are trying to manipulate them in all kinds of different ways.
Hmm. And the I totally agree. I mean, that's certainly, I think, my co-founder and I, a big part of our motivation and what we're doing with Virgils is, our parents for the most part had no idea what was going
Right.
on, and didn't even really have the language to understand that, hey, like, there are experiences you can have online that are at the very least like kind of confusing and weird, and would be good to have like some adult guidance and trying to process them. And at worst, like genuinely kind of traumatic.
Oh
Um,
yeah, no, for sure.
and with the media environment and everything, I think nowadays that's some feedback I've heard from a few different parents that we've worked with is the kids are, unfortunately, they feel like they're constantly bombarded, with sort of fear based, media. Like
Hmm.
it's very much something in the air. So yeah, I mean, having that be a part of the conversation at home, something you can get ahead of. Best case, that becomes something positive. It's something you can use to grow and learn. If you sort of set the expectations up front appropriately with the kids. So
Yeah, and I think one of the things that we have to realize is the kids that we're working with have grown up with, a computer in their hand,
yeah,
which, when I was, my dad and I built computers from like the time that I was in, elementary school on up, but they were desktop computers. They were in a particular place in the home, and
right.
all of this, kind of building out from that. And, but they've grown up with the computer in their hand.
Hmm.
When they're 2 years old, parents are handing it to them at a restaurant so that they'll be quiet enough so that the parents can enjoy a meal, you
Hmm.
know. And so as soon as we start putting these devices in our kids' hands, we have to be able to start having these conversations then.
Hmm.
That this
Hmm.
is what we do with these things. This is what they're for. This is how, this is how we use them safely. This is what we expect from, you using the device. I mean, it's, we have to realize that they are wonderful, really amazing tools that can be used in some really good ways. But like you said, there's things online that they have access to that can cause trauma. And so
Hmm.
we need to, it's like if, I have a lot of friends and family that are hunters, and you're not going to put a weapon in somebody's hand without first teaching them the safety around how to use it. I've
Hmm.
got friends and family that are farmers. You're not going to put a farming implement in their hand without saying, this is how you use it safely. This is how you go about plowing this field, whatever it is. And so this
Hmm.
is a tool. And I mean, we know from what happens online that it can also be a weapon.
Sure.
And we need to be able to say, this is how you use it. This is how you use it responsibly, but start having that conversation with them as soon as they can begin to understand it when we're putting it in their hands very early on. And we
Hmm.
have to ask those questions. How early on should we be putting it in their hands? There's lots of research that says that, we've been doing that way, way too early. And,
Hmm.
you know, so there's a lot. We have, and we could talk about this for hours and hours.
We will.
There's
The,
just
the
so
first
much
the
that
first
goes
of
into it.
absolutely many conversations. I so on that point of age, um, there's the question of when it's appropriate to give a kid a phone or give them access to an iPad or something like
Hmm.
that. But then there's sort of a mirror image consideration as they get older, which is relinquishing the controls that you may have put in place
Yeah.
when they're kids. How do you think about that now?
It's been something I've been thinking about recently because my kids are getting a little bit older. And I think it goes down kid to kid. I mean, it
Mm,
just is, when do you feel like they have learned how to, use the word earlier, how to self regulate? When
mhm,
they've learned
mhm,
how to, be able to work this out on their own, when they've shown through the actions that they've done while had those, parental regulations on, that they can handle this well. And so I
right.
think that's gonna, with my three kids, that'll change between the three of them. And I think so. I would be hard pressed to say to any parent, here's the age where you should, cut it off and let them do as they wish, especially when I know that, I need those on. For me, it's really good to have those in place for myself.
Mhm,
Are they, maybe part of it is pulling them away, but you've had those conversations about why they're there. So teaching them how to put them on for themselves, if that is helpful for them, it just,
So you're
so
at
it's going to
least
be,
no, sorry, go ahead.
no, I was just going to repeat what I said earlier, that it just is going to be a person to person kind of thing.
Yeah, that I like the way you one of the things you brought up too, which is the lifting the regular or the sort of control mechanisms or whatever entirely may not even be a good or useful kind of goal to have.
Mm.
I mean, I get a huge amount of value out of having the sort of like 5 minutes of Twitter a day, or sort of
Right.
little friendly tap on the back, like, hey, like time's up, kind of thing. So moving though, kind of sovereignty or at least control over the controls to the kids when the time is right. That's
Hmm.
maybe a better way to think about it.
Yeah, that's the way that I'm thinking about it.
hmm And I think what you said too at the beginning about the why being just such an important part. I mean, that's a thread all the way through. That's always a good thing to come back to. Why are we doing this in the first place? What is the purpose of technology at all? Which is a fun question that I think we'll unpack in these conversations and sort of other things that we do at Virgils going forward. I think there's a lot of confusion about that in the culture. You talked about like farmers or hunters, like understanding that these tools have a particular purpose and the
Right.
sort of those roles that they're in. But I think we've kind of stumbled into a very strange sort of period of human history or something where we found these things in our hands and there wasn't, I don't know if there's a whole lot of intention behind it, right? It wasn't like there were some people, some visionaries. I think, Steve Jobs obviously comes to mind. He talked about the bicycle
Right.
for the mind, where it's like these are tools to accelerate progress towards your deeply human, real world based goals. And, you were on the internet in the early 90s. My understanding is, sort of in the Usenet forums and everything, there was a lot of, kind of visionary, almost utopian
Oh, for
a lot of
sure.
ideas around, there's a very positive outlook for how these tools should be used. And then something kind of weird happens around the early 2000s where you have the ad-based model, consumer internet, everything takes hold and things take this turn away from that in a very strange way where instead of having this self-sovereign personal computing paradigm that I think a lot, was top of mind for a lot of folks in the technology industry, it turns into something where it's actually turns out that the way to monetize this stuff is by selling your attention to third parties or to
Right.
monetize it through certain video game mechanics that leverage behaviorism and things like that. So we've I think it's a good time to return to that those more fundamental questions about what is the ultimate purpose of technology, and is this something that we just want to let evolve, or do we actually want to have agency as individual technology users, and perhaps as the engineers or the people creating it in deciding what that relationship is ultimately going to look like? Because clearly, if the past 20 years are any indication, if you just kind of let it happen, it's not necessarily going to go. It's not going to go well.
No, and I think you really hit something there, and I think just intentionality in just in general is something
mm,
that is missing from the culture.
mm,
And I think this is a lot of what you're talking about is a lot of the reason for it is, you
mm,
know, I look back and think about like when so when I was in high school and I was thinking about, I wanted to have a certain record. I would have to go buy that CD. I could use like BMG or one of these one of these things that I would sign up either on paper at first or then online, have it sent to the house. But, I
mm,
would go to the record store, I would buy that CD, but I would have to intentionally go in. And even if I didn't know what I wanted, I would have
mm,
to intentionally go in and whether talking to somebody, find out something that I like and do that. But then when I was in college, Napster came along
mm,
and I could just download everything in the world. And, my computer was full of MP3s because I would dial in the morning
Yeah.
and then go to class, and the entire day it was, whether it was DSL or dial up, I don't remember what, I guess it was DSL at that time. And, so I mean, all day, if I'm not doing something else, it is downloading music. And I
Right.
probably never listened to everything that I did, but I think that's kind of one of those places where that culture of intentionality stops, because
Hmm. Hmm.
it just becomes that I have access to everything. And the
Hmm.
same thing can be said of, so now we're looking at, we have Spotify, we have Apple Music, we have, when it comes to music, we have Netflix and HBO Max and all of these things. We don't have to be intentional about what it is. We're just going to sit down and consume whatever it is that they're offering up to us in that moment. And I think that's even more true from what I see with, you know, younger generations who, I mean, I still am kind of going out and looking for particular things that I'm going to listen to or watch.
Hmm.
But, you look at, like, so my youngest is just watching whatever, video pops up next on YouTube.
Right.
And it's interesting to me, like, I will go on YouTube and watch a video, and rarely do I play whatever comes up next. But when I notice that with them, it is just a constant stream of whatever comes up next. And the
Hmm.
same is true with um, the music. It is just,
Hmm.
I'll go
Hmm.
on and I'll just click on this, so the kids will go on and they'll just click on a particular playlist on Spotify or Apple Music and just let it play. And
Right.
that's different than what I'm going to do. I'm going to still have some intentionality in that. And so, but I think in general, we've just lost that. We're waiting for things to happen to us as a
Hmm.
culture instead of making things happen and doing things ourselves. And I think
Hmm.
that's a huge problem. We're just letting the world interact with us instead of actually interacting with the world. And I think some of that has come from, whether it is these gaming ideas or just the way that technology has worked, starting in the late 90s, like you said, early 2000s, kind of going into that, where, everything became available. So I no longer really have to work to find it. I can just let it come to me as it comes.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think it's there's a super abundance of digital content out
Mm-hmm.
there. And I am personally very thankful that, I made it all the way through high school and, um, you know, bas- I mean, in college for the most part, by that time, it's like not as much of an issue, but like certainly high school and middle school, I wasn't at the behest of like the algorithmically delivered content
Right.
where you have the unlimited feeds from YouTube. I wasn't using Twitter or anything at that point, Facebook, Instagram, whatever else. And so you have the super abundance of content, and then because of the advertising driven business models, the inevitable like end state, like the limit of all this is just to keep you hooked in for as long as possible.
Right.
It's not about actual delivery of objective value in
Mm-hmm.
some real sense. So yeah, I mean, there are kind of two issues. One is the superabundance in general, which um, it's very strange. Like it makes me think actually that there must have been something analogous in like human evolution where parts of the brain are developing because like reality there's like infinite information around us at any
Right.
given time,
Right.
but somehow we know like what to pay attention to. So
Right.
there exist some structures in the brain, some kind of networks that figure out what is and is not salient, and it's working in a way that's not sort of conscious or not obvious. It's almost like we need to develop some some analog or something that's parsing through this infinite stream of digital information as well every time
Yep.
we interface with it. And I kind of wonder if maybe that was sort of the vision for like Siri, for example, or like these digital assistants, is that they would
Mm-hmm.
kind of venture off into, you have this personalized thing, as opposed to this hyper centralized,
Right.
you know,
I can see that.
algorithm
Yeah.
like Google or something,
Yeah.
right? You know, I think it's kind of a nice alternative vision, and I have hope that that might be possible, but just for like practical reasons, there needs to be some kind of trustworthy intermediary that is, you know, curating and delivering that content for you, because it's just literally impossible to sift through it
Well,
yourself.
I think it's that, and then I think it is just the sense of if I'm going to go on to this site, or I mean, I think it even gets outside of how we use technology. If I'm going to go to Netflix, if I'm going to go to YouTube, I'm
Hmm.
intentionally going there for a reason. And I think
Right.
so it's so yeah, you do need some kind of curation, but some of it's just that self curation that is just that I'm just not going to go on and just turn this on and let it spew whatever it is. I mean, we can look
Right.
at, just the, you know, indoctrination that people have had into conspiracy theories and these other kind of things over the last, 6 to 10 years. And so
Hmm.
much of that has been because they watched one or two things that really didn't have anything to do with that. But as they continued to, the algorithm started just giving them this and that because down the line, the people that were interested in canning peaches videos also were interested in whatever this conspiracy theory was.
Right.
And it's just weird when you think about how these things have come about and how much of it is just because we're allowing a computer to feed into us whatever it is instead of saying, I'm going to go watch this video on changing a tire. And now
Hmm.
I've learned how to change a tire, and now I'm going to turn YouTube off instead of letting it just continue to play what it thinks I want to see next.
Right. Right. And that's, you know, yeah, I think that's exactly right. If you're going to go into venture into some pocket of cyberspace or metaverse or whatever, like you're, you know, having a reality based goal before you
Hmm.
going in, having that be articulated sufficiently, and kind of committing to it, time boxing it, all that kind of stuff is going to set you up for success. The you know, the alternative, the sort of other end of the spectrum would be you're being driven by some sort of desire that you're not even fully conscious of, and you're just instinctively going to YouTube, or you know,
Right.
instinctively going to Instagram or Twitter, and then starting to develop a habit that's driven by, um, you know, it could be good, bad, it doesn't really matter, but some sort of, you know, internal motivation that you don't fully understand. That's how you get yourself into trouble.
Oh, yeah.
And
Oh, absolutely.
you know, and you know, it all goes back to Socrates, of course. It's sort of know thyself. You know, is
Yep.
the really the key there. Because if you don't reflect even in that small way to figure out what your goal is over the next 5 minutes, then you will end up as a passenger, not in the driver's seat.
Oh, for sure. It's like you and I were talking earlier today about, how addictive this AI art trend that's come up over the last
Yeah.
few months can be. And, but why, but I think you're absolutely right. Why is it that interests me on the level that it does? And
Yeah.
looking at that helps you then be able to use it instead of it using you.
Yes. Yeah. And it can be, if you do take that self-reflective stance, that can be extremely valuable, because
Oh, absolutely.
it'll tell you something that, you know, you don't know. It becomes this kind of more discursive medium, or something like that.
Yep.
So yeah,
Well,
interesting.
I've got to run.
Yes,
I've
I'm gonna let you go.
I'm enjoying this, but I got to run.
It was
You
really
have a
fun.
good one. Oh, absolutely. We'll have to do this again.
All right,
Um,
sounds good,
but
Justin. And I don't know if anybody actually tuned in. I'll have to look at the
yeah, we'll have to look.
we'll have to
We have
look.
two people
We'll find
watching
out.
us on Facebook right now, but that may be the two of us. I don't know.
Maybe the two of us. All
You
right,
have a good
sounds good.
one, man.
You too. Thanks so much, Justin. Bye.